The fog rolled in thick that morning, the kind that clings to your windshield and makes the world feel smaller, more suffocating. Demetrio Thomas gripped the steering wheel of his F-150 as they headed east on Highway 26 toward Portland International Airport. The heater hummed, pushing warm air through the vents, but the cab felt cold. Not from the weather, from the silence. Scott sat in the passenger seat, face turned to the window, watching the gray landscape blur past. 24 years old, his son, hadn't said a word since they'd left the house 30 minutes ago. Not, "Thanks for the ride," not, "See you in a few months," not even a grunt when Demetrio had asked if he had his passport. Just silence. Demetrio tried once more. "You excited about the program?" Scott's shoulders tensed. He nodded, barely, a movement so small Demetrio almost missed it. "Germany's beautiful this time of year. Your mom and I went to Munich back in—" "Dad." Scott's voice was flat, tired. "Can we just—" "No." The words hit harder than Demetrio expected. He swallowed what he'd been about to say and focused on the road ahead, the white lines, the taillights of the car in front of them. Anything but the stranger sitting next to him. When did this happen? When did his son stop looking him in the eye? When did they become two people who shared a last name and nothing else? Demetrio's mind drifted back 6 months. Scott had been different then, warmer, more present. They'd watched the Trailblazers together, argued good-naturedly about whether the team had a shot at the playoffs. Scott had laughed at Demetrio's terrible dad jokes, rolled his eyes but smiled anyway. Now, nothing. Just this wall of ice that Demetrio couldn't break through, no matter how hard he tried. They pulled into the departure lane at PDX just after 7. The airport was already busy, families hugging goodbye, business travelers rushing with roller bags, the controlled chaos of people going somewhere. Scott grabbed his backpack from the floor before Demetrio had even put the truck in park. "Scott, wait!" His son paused, hand on the door handle. For a second, just 1 second, Demetrio thought maybe he'd turn around, give him something. A smile, a "love you, Dad," anything. Instead, Scott glanced back, his eyes landing somewhere over Demetrio's shoulder, not meeting his gaze. "See you, Dad." That was it. No hug, no handshake, just a nod, and then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd of travelers streaming through the automatic doors. Demetrio sat there, engine idling, watching until the crowd swallowed his son completely. 24 years. He'd raised that boy, taught him to ride a bike, change a tire, throw a curveball, sat with him through homework and heartbreak, and now he couldn't even get him to look at him. His chest ached in a way he didn't have words for. The car behind him honked. Demetrio put the truck in gear and pulled away. His phone buzzed as he merged back onto Highway 26, heading west toward home. The Bluetooth connected automatically. Demetrio Thomas. "Mr. Thomas?" Dorothy Sullivan's voice came through the speakers, shaky in a way that made Demetrio's spine straighten. "You need to check the cameras, please." Demetrio frowned. Dorothy had worked for them for 10 years, cleaning, organizing, keeping the house running when both he and Kathleen were buried in work. She never called unless it was important, and she never sounded like this. Scared. "Dorothy, what's going on? Is everything okay?" "The security system." Her breath hitched. "The cameras at the house. You need to check them." "Why? What happened?" "Mr. Thomas, please." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Don't come home. Not yet. Check the cameras first. Find somewhere safe." His pulse kicked up. "Dorothy, you're scaring me. What?" The line went dead. Demetrio stared at the road ahead, his mind racing. Dorothy wasn't dramatic. She didn't call crying wolf. If she was this shaken, something was very, very wrong. He took the next exit and pulled into a park-and-ride lot, his hands unsteady as he put the truck in park. For a moment, he just sat there, listening to the tick of the cooling engine, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Then he grabbed his phone and opened the security app. 4 cameras, front porch, driveway, backyard, garage. They'd installed the system 2 years ago after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. Kathleen had insisted on it, said she wanted to feel safe when he traveled for work. He'd never thought he'd need to use it like this. Demetrio scrolled to the garage feed and tapped rewind. The timestamp read 6:45 a.m., right after he and Scott had left for the airport. He hit play, and his blood turned to ice. The video loaded in grainy black and white. There, parked in the driveway where he'd left it last night, was his F-150. He'd driven Scott and Kathleen's sedan this morning. The truck had stayed home. 3 figures stood next to it. The first 2 were unfamiliar, dark jackets, ball caps pulled low, faces turned away from the camera. But the third? Demetrio's stomach dropped. Benjamin Hayes, early 40s, clean cut, always in a pressed suit, corporate risk management specialist. Kathleen had mentioned him a few times over the past year, said he worked on consulting projects with her company. They'd met twice, briefly, handshakes and small talk at company events. Now he was crouched beside Demetrio's truck at 6:45 in the morning, doing something. One of the other men handed Benjamin a black package, shoebox-sized, wrapped in duct tape. Benjamin didn't hesitate. He dropped to the ground and slid underneath the driver's side. 90 seconds. His legs stuck out from under the truck, shoes scuffing against the driveway. Then he emerged. The package was gone. Benjamin pulled out his phone and took 3 photos. Driver's side, rear bumper, license plate. One of the men laughed, clapping Benjamin on the shoulder. The other spoke into his phone, loud enough for the mic to catch. "Done. He's finished. Just like she wanted." Just like she wanted. Demetrio felt like he'd been punched in the chest. He rewound the video, played it again, listened to those words again, just like she wanted. His hands were shaking so hard he nearly dropped the phone. He switched to the front porch camera, rewound to 6:50 a.m. There. Kathleen stepped out onto the porch in her business suit, coffee mug in hand. She glanced toward the driveway where Benjamin and the others worked. She didn't look surprised. She didn't call out. She didn't run inside to call the police. She smiled, a small, satisfied smile that Demetrio had seen 1,000 times over 24 years of marriage. The smile she gave when things went exactly according to plan. Then she turned and went back inside. Demetrio sat frozen in the driver's seat of his truck, the phone still playing the loop, Kathleen smiling, Benjamin planting something under his vehicle, the man's voice echoing in his ears, just like she wanted. His wife, the mother of his son, the woman he'd built a life with, a home with, she'd just set him up. He didn't know what was in that package. Drugs, maybe, a tracker, something illegal that would get him arrested the second he drove that truck. And Benjamin had taken pictures, proof that it was his vehicle, his responsibility. Kathleen would play the shocked wife, Scott would back her up, and Demetrio would be gone. His phone buzzed, another call. Kathleen. He stared at her name on the screen, his thumb hovering over the green button. For a second, he thought about answering, asking her why, screaming, begging, demanding an explanation. But then he remembered the smile. He let it go to voicemail. Demetrio sat in the parking lot for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. The fog pressed in around the truck, making the world outside feel distant and unreal. His mind spun through options. Go to the police? And tell them what? That his wife smiled in the driveway while someone did something to his truck? Without knowing what was planted, without concrete proof of a crime, he'd just sound paranoid, delusional even. And the moment they searched his truck, they'd find whatever Benjamin had hidden there. Then Demetrio would be the one in handcuffs. Go home and confront Kathleen? She'd lie. She was good at it. 24 years of marriage had apparently been one long performance. And if Benjamin was involved, if he had connections like Dorothy said, confronting them could be dangerous. No. He needed to know what he was dealing with first. Demetrio started the engine and headed back toward PDX. 30 minutes later, he was in the long-term parking garage, level 3, where his F-150 sat exactly where he'd left it before switching to Kathleen's sedan that morning. He'd stopped at a drugstore first. Latex gloves, Ziploc bags, a small toolkit. The cashier barely looked up. The garage was quiet. A few scattered cars. Nobody around. Demetrio pulled on the gloves and crouched beside the driver's side. His heart hammered as he looked underneath. There, behind the front wheel, held in place with industrial duct tape, the black package. He peeled it away inch by inch until it came free, heavier than it looked. He slipped it into a gallon Ziploc and walked back to the rental sedan he'd picked up, forcing himself to move like he was just carrying groceries. Normal, nothing to see here. He drove to the top level, to a corner where he knew the security cameras had blind spots. 25 years as a facilities engineer, he knew where they didn't look. Then he opened it, 6 bags. White powder, maybe 50 grams each. Black Sharpie on every bag. For transport, BH, Benjamin Hayes's initials. Demetrio didn't need to taste it to know what it was. Cocaine, or something close enough. Real or fake didn't matter. The second cops found this in his truck, he'd be in cuffs, and Benjamin had photos proving it was his vehicle. Kathleen would play the devastated wife. Scott would testify that his father had been acting strange lately, and Demetrio would be gone, not just arrested, but erased, discredited, destroyed. His phone buzzed. Dorothy. "Mr. Thomas, did you find it?" "Yeah." His voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I found it." "Dios mío," she exhaled shakily. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid." "Dorothy, what's going on?" "I overheard them. Mrs. Thomas and Mr. Hayes, 3 days ago, late at night. I was upstairs cleaning. They were in the office talking about you." Demetrio's stomach dropped. "What did they say?" "They said they needed to move fast, that you were asking questions about money. Mrs. Thomas said, once he's arrested, we move quickly, sell the house, liquidate everything." The world tilted. "And Scott?" Silence. Then quietly, Mrs. Thomas asked, "What about Scott?" Mr. Hayes said, "The kid's already on our side. He'll testify if we need him to." The kid's already on our side. Scott's cold shoulder this morning, the way he wouldn't look at Demetrio. How long had they been planning this? "Mr. Thomas, you can't go home. They're watching for you." "Where are you?" "I left. Told Mrs. Thomas I was sick. I'm at my sister's in Gresham." Smart. Dorothy had always been sharper than people realized. "Why are you helping me?" Demetrio asked. A pause. Then, "Do you remember 5 years ago, my daughter, Emma?" He did. Emma Sullivan, 25. Emergency heart surgery for some congenital defect. Insurance denied the claim, $120,000. Dorothy had been desperate, had come to him crying. Demetrio had pulled $50,000 from savings, told Dorothy it was a gift, not a loan. Never mentioned it to Kathleen, just told her they'd needed a new roof. "You saved my baby's life, Mr. Thomas." Dorothy's voice cracked. "She died 2 years later, but those 2 years, you gave me 2 more years with her. I will never forget that." Demetrio's eyes stung. "Dorothy, so now I save you. You are a good man, Mr. Thomas. Mrs. Thomas," she spat the name. "She is not a good woman." The rest stop appeared through a break in the trees 40 miles east of Portland. A small turnout with restrooms, vending machines, and a parking lot barely big enough for a dozen cars. When Demetrio pulled in, it was nearly empty. Just 2 18-wheelers idling at the far end and a gray sedan parked near the picnic tables. Dorothy's car. Demetrio parked 3 spots away, scanning the tree line, the road behind him, looking for Benjamin. For men in dark jackets. For anything wrong. Nothing. Just wind through the pines and the low rumble of diesel engines. Dorothy stood beside her car, arms wrapped around herself. She looked smaller than he remembered. Older. Her eyes were red-rimmed, hands shaking. "Mr. Thomas." Her voice broke. "Dorothy." Demetrio crossed to her. Before he could say anything, she gripped his arm. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner." "Stop. You're helping me now. That's what matters." They sat at one of the picnic tables, the wood damp from morning fog. Dorothy pulled a tissue from her purse, wiped her face, then looked at him with an expression he'd seen before, when he'd handed her that check 5 years ago. Gratitude mixed with something harder, determination. "How much do you know?" she asked. "Not enough. Tell me everything." She took a breath. "Mrs. Thomas and Mr. Hayes, they've been together 8 months. The words hit like a punch. "Together? You mean?" "Yes, an affair. I saw them in the house twice when you were out of town, March and May." 8 months. Had Kathleen seemed different, distant? Demetrio had been so focused on work, on Scott pulling away, he hadn't noticed. "They're not just having an affair," Dorothy continued, her voice dropping. "They're planning. 3 days ago, I heard her on the phone with him. She said, once he's arrested, we move fast, sell the house, liquidate accounts. I want him gone completely. No alimony, no custody fights, just gone." 24 years. They'd built a life together, raised a son, and now she wanted him gone, not divorced. Gone. "What about Scott?" Dorothy's face crumpled. Mrs. Thomas asked Mr. Hayes, "What about Scott?" He said, "The kid's already on our side. He'll testify if we need him to. Says his father's been erratic, unstable." The world narrowed to just Dorothy's voice, the words echoing in Demetrio's head. Scott, his son, going to testify against him, call him unstable. Does Scott know about the drugs? I don't think so. But Mrs. Thomas has been working on him for months. She tells him you're stressed, acting strange, that she's worried. She's very convincing. Demetrio rubbed his face. This wasn't just a setup. It was months of groundwork, turning Scott against him, building a narrative. And when cops found those drugs, every lie would become truth. Dorothy pulled a USB drive from her purse. "I've been copying files from her laptop for 2 weeks. Every time I cleaned her office, she never locks it, never logs out. She doesn't even see me in the room." She pressed it into his hand, warm from her pocket. "What's on it?" "Emails, 6 months' worth, messages between her and Mr. Hayes, bank statements. I don't know if it's everything, but it's something." Demetrio closed his fist around it. "Dorothy, if they find out, I don't care." Her voice turned fierce. "You are a good man. Mrs. Thomas is not a good woman." She stood, all business. You can't go home. Can't use credit cards or your phone for anything they can trace. You need somewhere they'd never think to look." "I have a place." The cabin. His dad's old hunting cabin near Mount Hood. Kathleen had been there once, 15 years ago. Hated it. No cell service, no running water. She'd never think he'd go there. "Good." Dorothy started toward her car, then turned back. "One more thing. Mr. Hayes, I've seen him with dangerous men. He has connections. Be careful." The line was almost exactly like the original, but Demetrio just nodded. "I will." Dorothy drove away, her sedan disappearing toward Portland. Demetrio sat at the picnic table for another minute, the USB drive heavy in his pocket, wind cold on his face. Then he got in the rental car and headed east, into the mountains, away from everything he'd known, away from the life that had just been revealed as a lie. The cabin appeared through the trees as the last light bled from the sky. Demetrio had driven for 2 hours, taking a winding route through back roads, doubling back twice to make sure he wasn't being followed. His hands ached from gripping the wheel. The structure looked exactly as he remembered. Small, weathered, tucked into a clearing surrounded by Douglas firs. The roof sagged in places, windows dark with grime. But it was standing. And more importantly, it was his. He'd been here twice in his life. Once as a kid when his dad had brought him hunting. Once 15 years ago when he'd thought about selling it and brought Kathleen to see if it was worth anything. She'd taken one look. No plumbing, no electricity, miles from civilization, and told him to sell it immediately. Called it a waste of money. Demetrio had kept it anyway. Paid the property taxes every year. Never told Kathleen when the bills came. Just quietly maintained this secret piece of his past. Now he understood why he'd held onto it. He found the spare key under a rock where his dad had always kept it and let himself in. The door groaned on rusty hinges. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Demetrio clicked on his phone's flashlight. Dust coated everything. The old wood stove, the rickety table, 2 cots against the wall. But it was shelter, and it was off the grid. He locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and sank onto one of the cots. For the first time in hours, he let himself breathe. His hands were still shaking. His knees throbbed from crawling under the truck. He smelled like rust and sweat and fear. But he was alive, and he still had the USB. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Demetrio closed his eyes and listened to the silence, so different from the house he'd left behind, the house that was no longer home. Tomorrow, he'd figure out his next move. Tonight, he just needed to survive. Morning light filtered through gaps in the shutters, thin and gray. Demetrio had barely slept, maybe 2 hours in fragments, waking at every sound. Branches scraping the roof, animals moving through the underbrush, the settling of old wood. But sleep wasn't the priority anymore. He sat at the dusty table, his laptop propped on a stack of old magazines, and plugged in Dorothy's USB drive. The folder opened. 317 files, 6 months of emails between Kathleen and Benjamin Hayes, financial documents, scanned contracts. Demetrio started with the emails. The first dozen were mundane. Meeting times, restaurant reservations, inside jokes he didn't understand, the language of an affair just beginning. Then the tone shifted. February 15th, Kathleen to Benjamin. I'm tired, Ben. This life, I can't keep pretending anymore. March 3rd, Benjamin to Kathleen. If you really want out, I can help, but it has to be clean. No messy divorce, no fighting over assets. We need leverage. April 8th, Kathleen to Benjamin. I want him gone completely, not just divorced, gone. No alimony fights, no custody battles. I want to start fresh. April 10th, Benjamin to Kathleen. That's going to take planning, and it's not cheap, but I have ideas, trust me. Demetrio's stomach churned. He kept scrolling. The financial documents painted a clearer picture. Bank statements showing transfers he'd never authorized. $63,000 moved from their joint account to Kathleen's personal account over the past 3 months. Small amounts at first. 500 here, 1,000 there, then larger chunks, 10,000, 15,000, money disappearing while he'd been focused on work, on keeping the business afloat, on trying to understand why Scott had grown so distant. He found a contract dated 2 months ago. Gregory Preston, attorney at law. Retainer, $15,000, paid from their joint account. Kathleen had been preparing for this, planning it. While Demetrio had been living his life, trusting his wife, she'd been systematically dismantling everything. Then he found the subfolder that made his chest tighten. BH-ST, correspondence. Benjamin Hayes and Scott Thomas. 83 emails spanning 3 months. Demetrio opened the first one, dated 3 months ago. April 2nd, Benjamin to Scott. Scott, your mom mentioned you've been stressed. College is tough, I get it. If you need someone to talk to, someone outside the family drama, I'm here. No judgment. Ben. Innocent enough. A family friend reaching out. April 12th, Scott to Benjamin. Thanks. Yeah, things are rough. I made some mistakes. Got in over my head with something I can't talk about. Trying to handle it on my own. April 15th, Benjamin to Scott. I've been in tight spots before. If it's financial, I have resources. Whatever it is, I won't tell your parents. Let me know. B. The next email had an attachment. Demetrio's hand trembled as he clicked it. Scott_debt_summary.pdf. The document opened. Offshore gambling site. Transaction history going back 8 months. Small bets at first, $20, $50, then larger, hundreds, thousands. Total outstanding balance, $67,000. Demetrio felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Scott, his son, 24 years old, drowning in debt, and Demetrio hadn't known, hadn't seen the signs, hadn't been paying attention. He kept reading. April 20th, Benjamin to Scott. I saw the statement. That's serious money, Scott. The people you owe, they're not patient. But I can make this disappear. I have connections who can erase this kind of debt if the situation is handled correctly. Interested? April 22nd, Scott to Benjamin. How? What would I have to do? April 24th, Benjamin to Scott. Your mom's going through a difficult time. Your dad's behavior has been concerning. Mood swings, paranoia. She's scared. If things escalate legally, she'll need someone to corroborate what's happening. You don't have to lie. Just tell the truth about what you've observed, how he's been pulling away, acting erratic. For that, I pay off $15,000 now. The remaining $52,000 after your mom's situation is resolved. Fair? Demetrio read it again and again. Benjamin had found Scott's weakness and weaponized it. April 28th, Scott to Benjamin. I don't know, this feels wrong. My dad's been distant but unstable. That's a strong word. May 3rd, Benjamin to Scott. Think about what's at stake, Scott. That debt, the people you owe won't wait forever. I'm attaching some information about them so you understand who we're dealing with. The next attachment made Demetrio's blood run cold. Photos, mugshots, criminal records from Seattle, loan sharks with assault convictions, armed robbery charges. One man had a scar across his jaw that looked like it had been opened with a knife. And a news article. Man hospitalized after alleged beating by loan collectors. May 3rd, Benjamin to Scott, continued. These are the guys your debt was sold to, nasty people. That $15,000 I'm offering, that buys you time. But if you back out now, I can't protect you. They'll come looking, and they don't negotiate. Silence for a week. Then, May 10th, Scott to Benjamin. I've been thinking, I can't do this. My dad and I aren't close right now, but he's still my dad. I don't want to be the reason he loses everything. May 10th, Benjamin to Scott, 2 hours later. Scott, you need to think very carefully. You took $15,000. That money's already been applied to your debt. If you walk away now, two things happen. One, your creditors find out the payment plan fell through. They send their collectors. Two, your dad finds out you took money to testify against him. How do you think that conversation goes? You're in this. The only way out is forward. May 23rd. Scott to Benjamin. Can we talk? I can't do this. I'm sorry. I'll figure out another way to pay you back. May 24th. Benjamin to Scott. You signed paperwork. You accepted payment. You agreed to cooperate. If you back out, I'll make sure everyone knows. Your mom, your dad, your school, everyone. You think your dad's disappointed in you now? Wait until he finds out his son tried to frame him for cash and then chickened out. There's no other way. You testify, we finish this, and you walk away clean. Or you bail, and I bury you. Your choice. The last email, dated 6 weeks ago, June 4th, Scott to Benjamin. I'm in, but I hate this. Demetrio closed the laptop and sat in the cold silence of the cabin. His son wasn't a villain. He was a victim. A 24-year-old who'd made bad choices, gotten desperate, and been manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to exploit shame and fear. Benjamin had paid Scott just enough to make him complicit, then threatened him into compliance. And Scott, believing he was protecting his mother from a man who was falling apart, had agreed. Because he didn't know the truth. Didn't know about the drugs in Demetrio's truck. Didn't know about the plan to liquidate everything. Didn't know his testimony was part of a conspiracy to destroy his father. He thought this was just a messy divorce. Demetrio's hands shook as he opened one more file. An email from Kathleen to Benjamin, dated 2 weeks ago. Kathleen to Benjamin. Are you sure Scott doesn't know about Plan B? Benjamin to Kathleen. God, no. The kid would never agree to that. He still thinks his father hung the moon. Keep him in the dark. The less he knows, the easier this is. Scott didn't know. He was a pawn in their game, just like Demetrio. The difference was, Demetrio could still save them both. Demetrio couldn't do this alone. He needed help, real help. He walked 3 miles into the nearest town, barely more than a gas station, a diner, and a post office. Found a cafe with free Wi-Fi, ordered coffee he didn't drink, and opened his laptop. First, he created a new email account, something generic, untraceable, pdx2024@protonmail.com. Then he spent an hour researching equipment. He needed cameras, small enough to hide, wireless so he didn't have to run cables, cloud storage so he could access footage remotely. He found what he needed: 4 mini wireless cameras, motion activated, HD quality, battery powered. Total cost with overnight shipping, $850. He couldn't use his credit card, too easy to trace. But the cafe had an ATM in the corner. Demetrio pulled another $1,000 in cash, walked to the post office, bought a prepaid Visa card, and used it to place the order online. Shipping address, Raymond Walsh, 2142 Skyline Boulevard, Portland, Oregon. Raymond was his neighbor, 3 doors down. Retired carpenter, 65, solid guy. They'd shared beers on Raymond's porch, helped each other with yard projects over the years. Good man, quiet, but dependable. Would he help now? Or would he think Demetrio had lost his mind? Only one way to find out. Demetrio used a burner email to send Raymond a message through an old carpentry forum they'd both used years ago. Vague enough not to raise alarms, clear enough that Raymond would understand. Raymond, it's Demetrio. I need a favor. A package is coming to your house tomorrow. Don't open it. I'll explain soon. If you're willing to help, leave your porch light on tomorrow night. If not, I understand. Either way, please don't tell Kathleen you heard from me. He hit send and closed the laptop. Now he had to wait. Back at the cabin, Demetrio spent the afternoon sketching. He pulled out a notebook and drew the layout of 2156 Skyline Boulevard from memory. Every room, every angle, every sightline. Living room, camera behind the picture frame over the couch, perfect view of the front door and the seating area where Kathleen and Benjamin would talk. Master bedroom, camera tucked into the bookshelf. If they were sleeping together, he'd have proof. Kathleen's office, camera inside the desk lamp. She did all her financial work there. If she was moving money, he'd see it. Garage, camera mounted in the corner near the tool bench. That's where they'd parked when Benjamin planted the drugs. If they came back, he'd catch it. 4 cameras, 4 critical points, enough to build a case. He labeled each location, noted the best installation times, mapped out how he'd get in and out without being seen. The security system he'd installed had a 30-second delay on the garage side door, enough time to slip in if he knew the code, which he did. He'd set it himself. His birthday, 0815. The hardest part would be timing. He'd need Kathleen and Benjamin both out of the house. Maybe when Kathleen went to work if Benjamin wasn't there, or late at night when they were asleep. Risky, but possible. He stared at the blueprint. Every line was familiar. He'd designed that house, framed it, wired it, built the deck where Scott used to play as a kid. It was his, and now he was planning to break into it like a stranger. The sun dropped lower, shadows stretching across the cabin floor. Demetrio thought about Raymond, about whether he'd help or turn him in, about whether he was putting his neighbor in danger just by asking. But he didn't have a choice. He couldn't do this alone. Tomorrow night, if Raymond's porch light was on, he'd know he had an ally. If not, he'd figure out another way. He folded the blueprint and tucked it into his jacket. Tomorrow night. One way or another, this started. The next evening, Demetrio drove into the outskirts of Portland just after dark. He parked 4 blocks from Skyline Boulevard and walked through backyards, staying in the shadows. Raymond's porch light glowed warm against the night. He was in. Demetrio approached from the back, moving quietly through Raymond's yard. The older man was waiting by his fence, a cardboard box in his hands. "Demetrio?" Raymond's voice was low. "Package came this afternoon." "Thank you." Demetrio took the box. "I know this seems—" Raymond held up a hand. "I don't need explanations. I've known you 5 years. You've never asked me for anything. Now you're asking. That's enough." He nodded toward Skyline Boulevard. "But you should know. There's a black SUV parked at the end of the street. Been there for 2 hours. I don't recognize it." Demetrio's stomach tightened. "They're watching the house. Looks that way. I still need to get in." Raymond studied him. "You sure about this?" "I don't have a choice." The older man nodded. "Then be careful. And if you need anything else, you know where I am?" Demetrio moved through the darkness, the box of cameras under his arm. The black SUV sat 3 houses down from his place, engine off, windows tinted. He couldn't see inside, but he felt eyes on him. He circled around, approaching from the back, the garage side door, his secret entrance. He punched in the code 0815. The 30-second delay started. Demetrio slipped inside, moving quickly through the familiar space. The house smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner, Kathleen's scent, Dorothy's work. It felt like enemy territory now. 4 cameras, 4 locations. He'd memorized the plan, living room first. He tucked the camera behind the picture frame over the couch, angling it toward the seating area. Green light, active, office next. Inside the base of Kathleen's desk lamp, pointed out. She'd never notice. Bedroom, behind books on the top shelf angled toward the bed. Garage. Corner mount behind an old bike helmet on the wall. 18 minutes. He was moving fast, hands steady despite the adrenaline. Then he heard it. Tires on gravel, a car door slamming. Demetrio froze, listening. Voices, men, coming closer. He'd been spotted. He slipped the last camera into his pocket, no time to install it, and moved toward the garage door. But headlights swept across the driveway, blocking his exit. The front door handle rattled. Demetrio bolted for the back door, bursting into the yard just as someone entered the house. He ran, jumping the fence into Raymond's property, then the next yard and the next. Behind him, shouts, footsteps pounding. "He's running! East side!" Demetrio crashed through bushes, his heart hammering. He could hear them behind him, 2, maybe 3 men, getting closer. He hit the tree line at the edge of the neighborhood and plunged into the forest. Dark, cold, only the sound of his breathing and their pursuit. A flashlight beam swept past him. He dove behind a fallen log, pressing himself into the earth. Where'd he go? Lost him. Fuck. Check the creek. Demetrio waited, not breathing, as footsteps moved away. Minutes passed. 5, 10. His legs cramped, his clothes soaked with mud and sweat. Finally, silence, just the wind through the trees. He waited another 20 minutes before moving, crawled to the creek, waded through icy water, and climbed out on the other side. Made his way to the main road, flagged down a passing truck. "My car broke down," he told the driver, offering $20 for a ride. The driver didn't ask questions. By the time Demetrio made it back to the cabin, it was past midnight. He was soaked, freezing, exhausted. But 3 of the 4 cameras were installed, and they were online. He opened his laptop connected to the cloud storage. 3 green lights, 3 live feeds, living room, office, bedroom. Now he could watch and wait. Demetrio sat in the cabin, laptop open, monitoring the feeds. Kathleen went to work, came home, watched TV. No sign of Benjamin. 8:47 a.m., Kathleen on her phone in the kitchen. He still hasn't come home. The police asked, but I told them I don't know where he is. Benjamin's voice through the speaker. Good. The longer he's missing, the better. When they find the drugs, everything will make sense. 6:30 p.m. Benjamin arrived at the house. The living room camera caught everything. Benjamin paced. We need to speed this up. Scott's coming back from Germany next week. Kathleen sipped wine. My son isn't ready. He doesn't have a choice. I'll remind him about the debt. 10:15 p.m. Kathleen alone in her office. She opened her laptop, started a video call. A woman appeared on screen. Professional, white coat, Dr. Patricia Brennan. Demetrio leaned closer to his laptop, watching. Kathleen, the test results, they're not good. Kathleen's voice was small. Kathleen's, how long? With aggressive treatment, maybe 18 to 24 months. Without treatment, 6 months. Kathleen broke down, crying. My son, I need to make sure Scott is taken care of. This money, it's all I can do for him. Demetrio sat frozen. Kathleen was dying. Cancer, stage 4. She hadn't told anyone. And suddenly, her actions took on a different color. Not just greed. Not just betrayal. Desperation. A mother trying to secure her son's future before she ran out of time. His anger mixed with something unexpected. Grief. For the woman she'd been. For the family they'd lost. But it didn't change what she'd done. It didn't excuse the lies, the drugs, the manipulation. It just made everything more complicated and more tragic. Demetrio stared at the laptop screen, at the frozen image of Kathleen crying to her doctor. The revelation had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. Cancer. 6 months to live. It explained everything. The desperation, the willingness to destroy him, the ruthless efficiency. She wasn't just stealing his life. She was trying to secure Scott's future before she ran out of time. But it didn't make it right. And Scott deserved to know the truth. All of it. Demetrio pulled out his phone, a burner he'd bought at a gas station, and opened an encrypted messaging app. He'd set it up days ago, hoping he'd find the courage to use it. He typed out a message to Scott's number. Son, this is Dad. I know about the debt, I know about Benjamin, but I also know something you don't. We need to talk, please. He hit send and waited. 10 minutes passed, 20. His phone sat silent on the table. Maybe Scott had blocked him. Maybe Benjamin had warned him not to respond. Maybe... The phone buzzed. How did you get this number? Demetrio's chest tightened. His son's words, cold and defensive, but at least he was responding. I have my ways, Scott, I'm not angry. I understand what happened, but there are things you don't know. Things about your mother, about Benjamin. Can we talk, please? Another long silence. Then, what things? Demetrio took a breath and typed carefully. I know about the $67,000. I know Benjamin offered to pay it off if you testified against me. I know he showed you mugshots and threatened you. Son, you were manipulated. You're not the villain here. You're a victim, just like me. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Scott was typing, deleting, typing again. Finally, how do you know all that? Because I've been watching. I have emails, bank records, everything. But Scott, there's something else, something about your mother that you need to see. Can we meet? Somewhere safe? 5 minutes passed. Then, where? The cabin. Dad's old hunting cabin near Mount Hood. Do you remember it? Barely. Mom hated that place. I know. That's why I'm here. Can you come tomorrow, early afternoon? Another pause. If this is a trap, it's not. I promise. I just want to talk to my son, that's all. A longer silence. Demetrio held his breath, staring at the screen. Then, okay, tomorrow, 2 p.m. I'm flying back tonight anyway. Mom doesn't know. Don't tell her, not yet. We'll figure this out together. Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. Demetrio's eyes burned. I know, son. I know. See you tomorrow. He set the phone down and sat in the darkness of the cabin. Tomorrow he'd see Scott. Tomorrow they'd start putting the pieces back together. But first, he needed to prepare, because what he was about to show his son would shatter everything Scott thought he knew about his mother. Scott arrived at 2:15 p.m. the next day. Demetrio heard the car engine before he saw it, a rental sedan bumping along the dirt road. He stood on the cabin's small porch, hands shoved in his pockets, watching his son emerge from the car. Scott looked thinner, tired, dark circles under his eyes. He wore a Portland State hoodie and jeans, a backpack slung over one shoulder. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the clearing. Then Scott walked forward, slowly at first, then faster. And before Demetrio could say anything, his son collapsed against him, sobbing into his shoulder. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Demetrio held him tight, the way he used to when Scott was little and had nightmares. I know, buddy, it's okay." "It's not okay. I took money. I agreed to—" Scott pulled back, wiping his face roughly. "I was going to testify against you. I was going to say you were unstable, paranoid. I was going to help them destroy you. You didn't know what they were really planning. But I should have. I should have come to you when I got in debt. I should have trusted you." Demetrio gripped Scott's shoulders. "Why didn't you?" Scott's face crumpled. "Because I was ashamed. Because you're this. You're perfect, Dad. You built a business, built our house with your own hands, never complained, never failed at anything. And I couldn't even handle my own problems without gambling them away. I didn't want you to know how badly I'd screwed up." "Perfect?" Demetrio shook his head. "Scott, I'm not perfect. I missed the signs that your mother was planning this. I didn't notice you were struggling. I was so focused on work, on keeping everything running, that I didn't see my own family falling apart. That's not perfect. That's failure. You couldn't have known, neither could you. Benjamin targeted you because you were vulnerable. He found your weakness and exploited it. That's what predators do." Demetrio guided Scott toward the cabin. "Come inside. There's something you need to see." Inside, Demetrio opened his laptop. The 3 camera feeds showed the house, empty now, midday, Kathleen at work. "I installed these cameras," Demetrio explained. "I've been watching, gathering evidence." He pulled up saved files. "This is what Benjamin planted in my truck." The photo of the 6 bags, white powder, Benjamin's initials. Cocaine, or close enough. If I'd been caught with this, I'd be in prison right now. Scott stared, his face draining of color. "This is how they were going to frame me. Make me look like a drug dealer, a criminal. Your mother would get everything, the house, the accounts, full custody if needed, and I'd be gone." "Mom knew about this?" Demetrio played the video, Kathleen smiling in the driveway as Benjamin worked, her satisfied expression, her complete lack of surprise. Scott sat down heavily. "Oh my God. There's more." Demetrio played the audio of Kathleen and Benjamin discussing the plan, their casual talk about destroying him, about using Scott, about moving fast once he was arrested. Scott listened in silence, his hands clenched into fists. When it finished, he looked up at Demetrio. "Why? Why would she do this?" "That's what I wondered, until I found this." Demetrio played the video from 4 nights ago. Kathleen on the video call with Dr. Patricia Brennan, the cancer diagnosis, 6 months to live. Scott watched, his expression shifting from anger to shock to heartbreak. She's dying?" "That's what she told the doctor. Stage 4 cancer, no treatment options left. She was trying to secure your future before she ran out of time." Scott stood, paced the small cabin. I don't understand. Why didn't she tell me? Why go through all this instead of just talking to us?" "I don't know, fear maybe, desperation. She convinced herself this was the only way." Scott turned to him, tears streaming. "We could have figured something out together, as a family. We didn't have to." He broke off. "Does this change anything? I mean, if she's dying..." Demetrio closed the laptop slowly. This was the hardest part, the part he'd been dreading. "Scott, there's one more thing, something I discovered this morning." He pulled up the investigation he'd done, the phone calls he'd made using a friend's connections in the medical field. I had someone check Dr. Patricia Brennan's credentials, medical license number, hospital affiliations, everything. Scott waited. She doesn't exist. There's no doctor by that name registered in Oregon, or Washington, or California. The silence stretched out. Scott's face went blank, like he was processing words in a foreign language. What? The doctor your mother was talking to, she's not real, or she's an actress Benjamin hired, I don't know which. But Scott, Demetrio met his son's eyes. Your mother isn't dying. She lied about the cancer, all of it. Scott sank back onto the cot, his face ashen. No, why would she lie about that? To manipulate us, to make us sympathize with her if the truth came out, to give herself a noble motive instead of just greed. Demetrio's voice was hard now, the anger he'd been suppressing finally breaking through. She weaponized a terminal illness, something real people suffer from, to cover up her betrayal. Scott put his head in his hands. I can't believe this. Even after everything, I thought maybe there was a reason. Maybe she was scared, desperate, trying to protect me, but this is who she really is. Scott looked up, his eyes red. What do we do? We confront her, together. We get her to admit everything on camera, and then we go to the police. When? Tonight. I'll call her, tell her we need to meet. She'll bring Benjamin. They'll think they can still control this. Demetrio pulled out his phone. But this time, we'll be ready. Scott nodded slowly. Okay. What do you need me to do? Just be there, tell the truth, and remember, no matter what she says, no matter how she tries to twist this, you're not responsible for her choices. Scott stood, walked over, and hugged his father again. I love you, Dad. I should have said that at the airport. Demetrio held him close. I love you too, son. We're going to get through this. Outside, the sun was starting to sink behind the trees. In a few hours, they'd go back to Portland, back to the house Demetrio had built. And this time, he wouldn't be running. This time, he was taking his life back. The confrontation happened that night, exactly as Demetrio had planned. He'd called Kathleen from a burner phone, told her they needed to talk. She'd agreed immediately, too quickly, he realized later. She'd thought this was her chance to control the narrative, to explain herself, maybe even to win him back. She'd brought Benjamin, and Demetrio had brought Scott, and his laptop streaming live to a private server. The confrontation was brutal. Kathleen had tried to maintain her composure at first, playing the concerned wife, the worried mother. But when Demetrio showed her the videos, all of them, including the fake cancer diagnosis, she'd crumbled. Benjamin had tried to run, Scott had blocked the door, and when Detective Elizabeth Brooks arrived with 2 patrol officers summoned by Demetrio's call 30 minutes earlier, both Kathleen and Benjamin had been arrested on the spot. Now, 2 weeks later, Demetrio sat in a sterile conference room at Portland PD, giving his official statement for the 3rd time. Detective Brooks sat across from him, recorder running, taking meticulous notes. Walk me through the surveillance footage again, she said. Specifically the garage camera from the morning of June 15th. Demetrio pulled up the video on his laptop. 6:45 a.m. That's Benjamin Hayes crouching next to my truck. You can see him slide the package underneath. Here. He takes photos with his phone. License plate, vehicle identification number, everything needed to prove it's my truck. Brooks watched closely. And you retrieved this package? Yes. From PDX long-term parking, 6 bags of white powder, 50 grams each. I photographed everything before resealing it. He showed her the images. Benjamin's initials are on every bag. We recovered the package from your vehicle 2 days ago, Brooks confirmed. Lab results came back this morning. It's cocaine. Street value approximately $18,000. Demetrio nodded. He'd expected that. We've also been investigating Mr. Hayes' background, Brooks continued, and we found something interesting. She pulled out a folder, spread documents across the table. Benjamin Hayes has done this before, twice, that we can confirm, both in the Seattle area 3 and 5 years ago. Demetrio leaned forward. What? Same pattern. He identifies vulnerable family members, usually someone in debt or legal trouble, offers to help in exchange for testimony against a spouse or parent, uses that leverage to facilitate asset seizures, insurance fraud, one case of identity theft. She showed him police reports, civil suits, arrest records. "He's been charged before?" Demetrio asked. "Charged? Yes. Convicted? No. The cases fell apart. Witnesses recanted. Evidence disappeared. He's good at covering his tracks." Brooks looked at Demetrio. "But this time, we have everything. Video evidence, financial records, your son's testimony. He's not walking away from this." "And Kathleen?" Brooks' expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Thomas is cooperating. She's admitted to conspiracy, to authorizing the drug placement, to the financial fraud. Her attorney is arguing she was manipulated by Hayes, that she was vulnerable after—" She paused. "She's claiming she was diagnosed with terminal cancer." "That's a lie." "We know. We've subpoenaed her medical records. There's no cancer diagnosis, no Dr. Patricia Brennan on record anywhere. It appears Hayes hired someone to pose as a doctor during that video call." Demetrio sat back. Even knowing it was fake, hearing it confirmed still felt like a gut punch. "What about Scott? My son?" "Scott's been very helpful. Given his age, the coercion involved, and his full cooperation, the DA is offering a deal. 2 years probation, mandatory gambling addiction treatment, and restitution. He'll repay the $15,000 Hayes gave him, plus court fees. No jail time." Relief washed through Demetrio. "He'll take it." "Good." Brooks closed her folder. "Mr. Thomas, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of ugly divorces. But this was systematic, premeditated. If you hadn't found that camera footage, if Dorothy Sullivan hadn't warned you, you'd be in prison right now." "I know. You're lucky you had people who believed in you." Demetrio thought about Dorothy, about Raymond, about Scott finally coming back to him. "Yeah, I am. Yeah, I—" 3 months later, Demetrio sat in a courtroom, Scott beside him, as the judge read the verdict. The trial had lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution had presented everything: the surveillance footage, the financial records, the emails between Kathleen and Benjamin, Scott's testimony about the extortion, Dorothy's account of what she'd overheard. Benjamin's attorney had tried to argue entrapment, illegal surveillance, that Demetrio had doctored the videos. But the evidence was overwhelming. Kathleen's attorney, Gregory Preston, had taken a different approach, painting her as a victim of Benjamin's manipulation, a frightened woman who'd made terrible choices under pressure. But when the fake cancer diagnosis came out, when the jury learned she'd fabricated a terminal illness to justify her actions, whatever sympathy they might have had evaporated. Now, the jury foreman stood. "In the case of the state of Oregon versus Benjamin Hayes on the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of possession of controlled substances with intent to frame, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of extortion, how do you find?" "Guilty." Benjamin sat stone-faced as the verdicts were read. 8 counts total, guilty on all of them. Then it was Kathleen's turn. "In the case of the state of Oregon versus Kathleen Thomas on the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of filing false police reports, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of financial fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." Scott's hand found Demetrio's under the table, squeezed hard. Sentencing came a week later. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair, looked at Benjamin Hayes first. "Mr. Hayes, you have made a career out of destroying families. You prey on the vulnerable, exploit their weaknesses, and profit from their pain. This court has reviewed evidence of at least 2 prior cases with similar patterns. You are a danger to society." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I hereby sentence you to 9 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary, no possibility of parole for the first 6 years." Benjamin's attorney started to object. The judge held up a hand. "Furthermore, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling $247,000. Your assets will be seized to satisfy this debt." Then she turned to Kathleen. "Mrs. Thomas," the judge's voice was colder now, "you didn't just betray your husband, you weaponized your own son. You used his love, his loyalty, his desire to protect you as a tool to destroy his father. You fabricated a terminal illness, something real people suffer from, to manipulate everyone around you." Kathleen sat with her head down, hands folded in her lap. You showed no mercy to your husband of 24 years, and this court will show you the same." The gavel fell. 6 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary, no parole eligibility for 3 years. All marital assets are to be returned to Demetrio Thomas. You will pay restitution of $78,000 for the funds you illegally transferred. Kathleen finally looked up, her eyes finding Scott. "Son, I'm sorry. I love you." Scott turned away. The bailiffs led them both out. Benjamin walked with his head high, defiant to the end. Kathleen stumbled, had to be supported. In the gallery, Dorothy Sullivan sat beside Raymond Walsh. Both nodded to Demetrio as he and Scott stood to leave. Outside the courthouse, Portland rain falling steadily, Scott stopped. "It's really over." "Yeah," Demetrio put his arm around his son's shoulders. "It's over." "Do you think—" Scott hesitated. "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" Demetrio considered the question. Kathleen, the woman he'd loved, married, built a life with, the woman who'd tried to destroy him. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not today." Scott nodded. "Me neither." They walked to the parking lot together, father and son, ready to start rebuilding what had been broken. 6 months later, Demetrio and Scott sat on the back deck of 2156 Skyline Boulevard, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise paint the Portland skyline in shades of gold and pink. The house felt different now. Demetrio had repainted the interior, replaced furniture, changed the locks, made it his again. Scott had moved back in after finishing his probation requirements, enrolling at Portland Community College to complete his degree. They'd established new routines, breakfast together every morning, dinner most nights, honest conversations about money, about feelings, about the things they'd both kept hidden for too long. "Dad?" Scott set down his mug. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret it? Marrying Mom, having me, all of it?" Demetrio looked at his son, 24 years old, clean from gambling for 8 months, working part-time at a law office while going to school, stronger than he'd been, but still healing. "Never," Demetrio said firmly. "Scott, if I hadn't married your mother, I wouldn't have you, and you're the best thing I've ever done." "Even after everything I did?" "You made mistakes, so did I. The difference is, we're fixing them, together." He reached over, gripped Scott's shoulder. "That's what family means. Not perfection, but showing up to do the work." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "Dorothy's coming over for Sunday dinner," Scott said. "She's bringing empanadas, Emma's recipe." "Good." Dorothy had become like family. She still cleaned the house twice a week, but now she joined them for meals, for holidays. Raymond, too. The three of them, Demetrio, Scott, and their unlikely chosen family. "And I got my 6-month chip yesterday," Scott added quietly. "From the GA meetings. Gamblers Anonymous." Scott attended 3 times a week, had a sponsor he called regularly. "I'm proud of you, son." "Thanks," Scott smiled, a real smile, the first Demetrio had seen in over a year. "I couldn't have done it without you." Demetrio thought about everything they'd been through, the betrayal, the fear, the long nights in that cabin, not knowing if he'd ever see his son again, the confrontation, the trial, but also the reconciliation, the healing, the slow, painful process of rebuilding trust. "You know what I learned from all this?" Demetrio said. "What?" "Trust isn't about closing your eyes and hoping for the best. It's about keeping your eyes open, seeing people clearly, flaws and all, and choosing to love them anyway." Scott nodded slowly. "I wish I'd understood that before." "Me too. But we understand it now, and that's what matters." A car pulled into the driveway, Raymond's truck. "You boys ready to work?" the older man called out. "That deck isn't going to rebuild itself." Demetrio laughed. "Coming!" He and Scott stood, gathered their mugs, and headed inside. Through the window, Demetrio could see Raymond unloading lumber, Dorothy's car pulling up behind him with a cooler of drinks. This was family. Not the picture-perfect version he'd imagined 24 years ago, but something real. Something earned. As they walked outside to join Raymond, Scott bumped his shoulder against Demetrio's. "Hey, Dad?" "Yeah?" "I love you. I love you too, son." And for the first time in a long time, those words felt like a promise they could both keep. 1 year after the trial, Demetrio Thomas sat down to write about his experience, not for publication, just for himself, and for anyone else who might need to hear it. If I could go back and change one thing, it wouldn't be marrying Kathleen. It wouldn't be trusting her. It would be creating a space where honesty could exist without judgment, where Scott could have come to me with his gambling problem without shame, where Kathleen could have told me she was unhappy instead of plotting my destruction. Because silence, that's where secrets grow. And secrets, that's where betrayal begins. I learned to watch my accounts, to ask questions, to verify what I'm told instead of accepting it blindly. Some people call that cynicism. I call it wisdom. But I also learned something more important. Family isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about creating a place where people can fail, can struggle, can be broken, and still be loved. Scott made terrible choices. So did I. The difference is, we chose to face them together. That's the lesson I want to pass on. Not about surveillance cameras or legal battles or protecting your assets, though those things matter. The real lesson is this: build a family where people can tell the truth, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because the truth, painful as it is always better than a beautiful lie. And love, real love, isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Demetrio Thomas.